Hello and welcome to episode 235 of... This is what happens when you do so many bloody podcast shows. Page one, the Writers' Podcast. I'm Marco. No, I'm Tarek.
Oh dear. You can tell it's going to be a good episode already.
But we are sitting in a podcast studio, absolutely sweating. It's so hot. I can barely think straight. I'm bursting on the toilet. But this is the excuses I've got for why I've been so bad.
If this is your first episode, I apologise.
I apologise for nothing.
We are much more professional normally. But yes, I'm Marco. And yeah, thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And we have got a great back catalogue of guests there, so please do check that out if you haven't already. This week's guest is, last episode we were talking sort of historical crime, but this one's very different. It's a sort of, it's fantasy, but it's more grounded fantasy, more sort of myth retelling and all of that sort of stuff.
That's right. G.R. Dawson is our guest this week, and they are a very interesting author who've done that kind of grounded magical realism type stories. So not your kind of fantasy romantasy stuff, which is taking up so much of the headlines at the moment. So it's quite a nice change of pace, and it's their latest novel, The Lighthouse at the Edge of the World, as you'll hear in the interview, is a kind of loose retelling of the Orpheus story. So again, it's one of these novels which I have to say we kind of went through a big phase of them a while back, right? All these kind of retellings of Greek myths, of Roman stories, etc. And it seems to have kind of calmed down a bit now. I feel like they've not been on for a while, so I feel like I'm ready for another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a chat about why these things do happen, why in cycles you do revisit these things. But I suppose that is, as we say in the episode, that's why they're myths and legends. They have staying power, these stories. That's right. It's fair to say. Before we get into the episode, I'm just going to mention our Patreon, where you can support the podcast. It really helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. So please do check it out. You get lots of benefits, early access to episodes, bonus bits of episodes with some of our guests, including, for example, G.R. Dawson stays behind and tells us, there's an extra bit where she tells us about 5 books that influenced her as a writer. So that's a Patreon exclusive. That's right. And lots of other benefits. So please do check out the Patreon. I'll put a link in the podcast description. Also want to mention our podcast network, Step Podcasts, where you can catch our shows and the shows of Nadine Matheson, and hopefully soon more shows in due course as well. And also our joint show, Adventures in Publishing Land, where we and Nadine chat about the latest publishing news. So please do check that out as well. But for now, we will get into a quick advert, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
So for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page 1.
Did you always want to be a writer?
I did. I didn't know in what sort of capacity it would be. But when I was 3 or 4, my grandma was helping to raise me. And she would put together these little paper packets and be like, draw your pictures and then dictate to me the stories. And so I was writing these little books with my grandma even when I was like a little toddler. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know like if I was gonna, I really wanted to work for Disney. I was like, I'm gonna be a voice actor for the Disney cartoons. That'll be fun. Nice. And it just kind of came to this point where I was trying to create stories in different mediums. I was writing music. I was in musical theater and regional theater. I was writing prose. And I kind of got to this point where I was like, well, I really want to focus on like one thing. So I decided to go to theater school and be a playwright. And about
Nice.
2 days in, I hated it.
Oh, okay. What was it? What was the big turnoff for that then?
So I think that with theater, there is a lot of, how do I put this? Controlling beliefs about how a person is supposed to look and who is supposed to be the main character, and who gets the stage time. I really love the collaboration process, and that's something that I still really love about theater. But I also like was going to do all this like playwriting work and like stage work during the day and then coming home and just kind of being like, but I want to do it all. I want to play all the characters, and I want to like make all the sets, and I want to, write the script. And so I was like, well, that's books. So
So I mean, at that point, is that when you sort of started taking writing more seriously then at that point?
Yeah, I think so. I had kind of this little, like my baby that I was working on in undergrad on the side, and I loved that book so much. And then I was kind of like, well, this is what I want to do. And so as soon as I was out of undergrad, I was like, well, I want to go to an MFA program, and I want to, I didn't really know what direction I was going to go in until I started reading a little bit more stuff that wasn't assigned by my undergrad. And I discovered Charlie Jane Anders. And I was like, oh my gosh, like speculative fiction. This is my jam. Like this is what I used to write when I was a kid. And it was kind of this like returning home to myself. And that's when I really started to dive into, I want to write books and I want them to be fantasy and science fiction. And this is what I want to do.
And then so you did a master's course that you did.
I did 2 master's courses.
Okay.
So the first one I did was I was kind of pressured into becoming a teacher. And so I ended up going and getting a master's in secondary education with a focus in English. And I was a drama teacher at a high school for 5 years.
Nice.
And then I was like, well, my big dream, though, was to go to an MFA program. And so I applied and got in to Stone Coast, and it was life-changing. So I ended up with way too many degrees, and I'm done. No more.
And in what way, 'cause we've chatted to folk a few times, you've done a creative writing course of some kind, whether it's like a master's or just like a night school class or a creative writing course. But you said yours was life changing. How did your one work then, and in what way did it impact your life going forward?
Yeah, I think that it's the community. So I was really isolated as a teacher, especially when you're an art teacher. It isn't like you are in like the math department. You are your department. And the school that I was teaching at didn't have a lot of funding, didn't have a lot of administrative support. And so it was me and 80 kids and like $300, and we were supposed to put on like 5 plays. And I was like, here we go. And I also at the time was kind of in this like really bad situation where I was having a lot of parts of my life controlled, so I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have a lot of social time for myself. And so going to Stone Coast and meeting people and making new friends and finding community, and also like as a queer person finding other queer folk who like the things that you like. It was really awesome, and I'm still friends with a lot of those folks, and a lot of those folks have like gone on to do really great things, and they're still writing, and I'm just really grateful to have them in my life. So I think that yes, I learned a lot, especially from some of my mentors, and like the workshops were great, and reading more extensively in the fantasy genre was wonderful. But I think that the big thing that I took away from it was the sense of belonging and these people who are now in my life forever.
It's an important point, isn't it? Because writing, everyone thinks it's a solitary thing. You have to do it yourself. You don't. It's all down to you whether or not you get it done and all that sort of thing. But I think it is definitely true. I've found that myself as well, that when you find others that are interested in it, it's not even that you don't even need to really discuss the stories with them or anything like that, but just having that sort of common bond and knowing that others are doing the same thing and sometimes have the same struggles as you and all of that sort of thing is hugely important, I think, for something otherwise that can be quite isolating at times.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's not even, sorry, it's not even like it often feels like, or you could imagine it might feel like it's a kind of competition, like, people are all trying to get ahead and everyone's different levels of success and stuff, but it never feels like it feels like everybody wants everyone to do well, and everyone's trying to help everyone up. Yeah. It's really nice.
There community. Are one or two exceptions.
There are a few arseholes. Yeah. Not everyone's as nice as us, obviously.
So I mean, you did this course, you found the community that helped you to believe in your writing, I guess. But when did you actually think, right, I'm now going to try and because I think you started writing short fiction first. Is that right? You did a lot of short fiction before you turned to the novels?
Yeah, I published short fiction before, and that was because I was working on these longer pieces, and my mentor at my thesis mentor at Stone Coast was James Patrick Kelly, and he's like, you could publish now if you wrote some short fiction. So I was like, oh, okay. So I got my publishing toe in the water by writing about 4 pieces under his tutelage. And he was like, okay, like 3 of these are good. And I sent out my very first one that was ever published was in 2017 in Mothership Zeta. And it was kind of this satire about the chosen one trope, and I really love that story. It was called The Legendary Legend of the Darkly Slayer. The second one was a more known one. It came out in fantasy and science fiction in 2017, the end of 2017. And that was Marley and Marley. And that was kind of the first short story that really went out there and was seen. And it's still one of my favorites. It was like the day that I got the acceptance for F&SF, I was like, okay, we're doing it. Like, this is, I like cried. And I was like, finally, okay, here we go.
And how did you find working on those short stories in terms of, because they're very different beasts, right? Writing a short story and writing a long form fiction book is very different, and some people find one easier than the other, and I always wonder about how do you know when an idea is suited for a short story or a long story? How do you know? Is it an instinctual thing that whether or not it's got legs, or do you sit down and break it down? What's your process there?
Yeah, I think that it has to do with like, what do I want to say with this idea, and also how many details and how many kind of like variations, how many motifs does it have? Like, I see writing very like musically. And so it's kind of, I'm like, okay, is this a shorter part? Like, is this an in and out, or is this like a whole symphony? Like, is this a whole thing? So I think about like, do I want to focus on this one thing that's happening? Or do I want to build the world out and put them through multiple scenarios? So the last short story I published was 6 People to Revise You in Uncanny Magazine, which is another one of my favorites. And it is about this futuristic world where you can go into this place called Revisions and revise yourself based on feedback from external forces in your life, to be the best version of yourself. And so you go around and get these people to fill out information about you, what they think you could change about yourself, and then you take that in and they do the procedure. And I was like, I saw it as a short story because I was like, okay, I want it to be formed in these 6 people. Like I want it in 6 different parts, and I really want to focus on this one person. But I didn't feel like I had 350 pages of what this person was going through. I'm like, this is a snapshot in this person's life. It's one person. I really don't want to get into how Revisions works. It's more about the meditation on how others see us and how we need to see ourselves. So that was always going to be a short story. My first book that was published, The First Bright Thing, started off as a novella.
Right.
And I was like, okay, it's going to be, these 3 characters, and each one of them is going to have an act, and it's going to be, this long. And then I got to the end of it and I was like, oh, there's so much more though. And so it kept growing and growing. And I think it was published at 354 pages. So, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how much you have to say and how much focus you want to put on how many things.
But it sounds as well like, occasionally what you go into it thinking can change as you start to explore that story or explore the characters or something like that. You might find that there's more or less, I suppose, that you want to explore. I wondered as well, I want to ask about, before we talk about First Bright Thing, how you got your agent, because I think I'm right in saying your agent is based in the UK. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, how was that search? Did you do the usual thing of 3 chapters and all that sort of stuff to lots of people? How did that work?
Yeah, so my agent journey is really weird. So I started querying. Okay, so I queried for like a week in 2008 when I was still in undergrad with my baby book. And those queries, I went back and looked at them and they were terrible. And I'm like, well, yeah, no, nobody took me. And then I started querying really seriously with a new project in 2016. I actually got my first full request the day that my dog was born.
What day?
And then he kept growing and I kept not getting a full request response. And I wanted to take a picture of this old grizzled dog and be like, I still haven't heard from you and here is the timeline. And I think I did finally hear back about it after I'd already gotten an agent, like years later. So I started in 2016, and I didn't land an agent until 2019. I don't know if it was, I think it was just I didn't have the right project. So I wrote one project that ended up being my MFA thesis, and I got a lot of full requests, a lot of partial requests, got really close, but then they'd be like, well, I don't know how to market this. Well, I don't know this, I don't know that. And I'm like, okay. So I wrote another piece and I got even fewer. I was like, okay. And so at the time I was co-writing this fun book with a friend. And my friend was like, oh, well, I've been talking to an agent and she wants to represent us for this project if it's good. So we sent it to her, and the agent was like, absolutely. Also, if you want to be represented on your own too, like, please send in a manuscript. The only one I had at the time was First Bright Thing. And I was like, I love this book, but I don't know. And she was like, oh, I love it. And I was like, yay. So that was my first agent. And that was actually not Stevie. So,
So was that a US agent, that one?
It was not. She was also overseas.
Okay.
And so we did part in 2023. And my friend Ronnie, R.R. Veerdy, was like, oh, you've parted with your agent. I know this person who's amazing, because Stevie Finnegan was his UK agent at the time. And so he introduced us. Stevie was like, oh, one of my other clients like talked really highly of you, like loved your book, because she's Travis Baldry's agent, and Travis had blurbed First Bright Thing. And so she listened to it, and she got the audiobook immediately, and she was like, yes, let's do this. And like, it was just like this perfect kismet where it was just this great match.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really have like a super definitive, I queried and that led to it. It was like that community stepping up and believing in me. And so, yeah, I love Stevie. Like it actually, I think, helps to have a UK agent, especially right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask about that because most folk, in fact, I think pretty much everyone we've spoken to, really, or the vast majority, have all had agents based in the country where they are. I know it must be unusual to have a US author with a UK agent, or a UK agent with a US author. How does that work practically? Like, obviously there's time differences, and you can't really meet up as often, etc. Do you find it that is it work totally fine, or are there quirks about it?
No, not really. I mean, we both kind of lead weird schedules, and Stevie's used to working with people in the US. And like, I'm a night owl, or I get up really early, so we definitely make like the timing work. Also, like, I have lived most of my life in the middle of the US, so I'm not by one of the coasts. So I'm not used to meeting up with people. Like, most of my professional relationships in the publishing world have been on phone or on Zoom or through email. So that living in Omaha when I started my career, and now in Minneapolis, like, we're 1,500 miles away from New York. Like, there's no meeting them anyway.
And is there much of a in terms of your UK agent knowing the US market? Did you have you found it difficult to get your books in the US, or is that not been a problem getting your books out in different parts of the world?
No, not really.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that most agencies work with sub-agents, and so when you're doing foreign rights, there's going to be other agents nearer those countries that are doing those foreign rights for you, and there are UK and US agencies that work very closely together to help each other. So I haven't run into anything.
No, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I want to ask as well, because you mentioned there, obviously you changed agent, and that can be a very scary thing for, especially for a new author to do, where you don't need to tell us if you don't want to what brought that about, but I suppose, was it a scary decision, and were you worried that it would be as difficult to find a new agent after that point?
I was scared, but I think that when you have that gut feeling that this is something that you need to do, you, like, even if it is scary, you kind of have to, do what's best and stick by your guns and go for it. And I was really grateful that the community kind of just grabbed me and like kept me afloat and was like, okay, here.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's another reason why it is good to have a community, because at times like that, it can really help, obviously, as well. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll obviously talk about the new novel in a moment, but the First Bright Thing was the first novel, which was really well received. I think it won the Golden Crown Award as well. How did that feel for your first novel to end up winning an award like that?
It was really magical. I got so excited that I ended up getting COVID from the microphone at the ceremony, which was not magical. But when I first started writing, my wife bought me this really beautiful dress. And she was like, for your first award, you're going to wear this dress. And I was like, yeah, okay, buddy. And so I wore it that night when we went to the ceremony. I was really lucky that they just happened to have the awards in the city where I was living, just like Kismet. Because it's one of those conferences that moves around the U.S., so you never know where they're going to be. And so, yeah, I wore the dress, and I was like, we'll see. And I was up for 2 awards, and I won 2 awards. And I was like, I'm glad I had written something down. But I thanked my wife, and I was just like, I'm up here in her dress, like she, So it's good to have those moments and to make sure to celebrate those moments, because there's so much rejection and there's so much self-doubt that when you have a really magical night like that, it's important to let it soak in.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice, I think. And now we have danced around it, but your newest book is The Lighthouse at the Edge of the World, and it's out very soon. I wonder if you could maybe tell us what the book is about for those that don't know.
Yeah, so it's a sapphic retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice. It has 2 main characters. One of them is Nera, who is the daughter of the ferryman of the dead. In this world, the one of the Great Lakes in the U.S., Lake Michigan, is the River Styx. And if anybody's ever been to Chicago, you know that Chicago is this super bright, vibrant city with all this history, constantly moving, very alive. And then it's on the shore of this very, very big lake. And then the lake is just dark at night. So you have all of the city lights, and then you have nothing. And when I was an undergrad living in Chicago, I would go out to the lake and just see this juxtaposition and be like, oh my God, this is liminal. Like, this is something to do with life and death here. So I put the station for the dead and the ferryman of the dead on the shores of Chicago. Nice. In the book, her father is about to retire, and she's going to take over the job. And everything's going great until one night there is a woman who is very alive, and she finds her way onto the boat. And she's looking for her sister, who has passed away really tragically. So they strike up a deal that Nera is going to help the woman find her sister if the woman teaches Nera a little bit more about the living and helps her keep the station afloat. And it's got demons and Grim Reaper dogs and original music, and it's super fun. And it's my joyous grief book.
That sounds fantastic. I have to say, I do love that. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think over the past decade or so, there's definitely been an interest across probably a variety of genres, but there's been an interest in sort of revisiting and retelling myths, and I just wondered, what your thoughts were as to why that was that there was this interest in sort of revisiting these old stories and telling them anew.
I don't know. That's a really good question. I think that we've always kind of looked at the myths. I think that maybe, and I might be completely wrong about this, but I think that maybe people who are adults now kind of got like a booster pack when it came to Greek mythology, because they read Percy Jackson, and Percy Jackson was so big when kids were, when people were children. I missed Percy Jackson, unfortunately. I was a couple of years too old. But they're amazing books. And I think that maybe that helped. I think that just like in the 90s and the early aughts, there was a lot of like myth retelling, and it kind of sparked imagination again. For me, I didn't know about the story of Orpheus and Eurydice until I was in undergrad, and I saw Sarah Ruhl's Eurydice at the Victory Gardens Theater. And I was like, oh my God, there's like so much you can do with this. I think that it's kind of why we keep going back to Shakespeare, is that you have these characters, you have these themes, and there's so many different ways that you can look at it. And so it's just a big sandbox. It's, fan fiction at its finest. So yeah, I don't. That's a question.
I mean, I suppose they're myths and legends for a reason, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that's
They
true.
don't die out,
I mean, I remember as a kid having a big book of I think it was Greek myths and mythology, but kind of stories, and I remember I was obsessed with it for a long time, like all those kind of really cool legends and those like heroes and the monsters and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was fantastic, and I suppose you're right in that. I guess it is a lot of the people who grew up reading those stories want to keep retelling them in different ways, and I wonder if it's almost a little bit like folk who read comics going into writing superheroes, and we've seen this superhero resurgence in this kind of more adult way perhaps than they were done 20, 30 years ago. So I do wonder if it's just people growing up with this stuff wanting to adapt it, but to do it for a modern adult audience or something perhaps. But
Yeah, absolutely.
And your books and I think your short stories, they're all speculative in different ways, but I think they also feel quite connected to the real world as well. And is that because obviously there's a broad range of speculative novels. You can have stuff that's completely fantastical and stuff like that. But do you I just wondered why you want to tell stories that have that connection, that slightly more grounded feel to them.
Yeah, I think that this is how I talk about the world, I guess. I think that there is a lot of magic in real life, and that especially in the United States, we don't really embrace that. There is a very bloodied history of us disconnecting from the land and disconnecting from history. And so being able to bring magic, the lens of speculative into what we are going through and the world that we know, at least for me, it's like you get to walk down the street and be like, if I, went down this alley, I'm going to find something, or there's something out there that's, watching me, or it's fun to interact with the world around you. I also think that it's really important for me to take the information that I know about the world that we live in and try to put it in a lens that makes sense or teaches us something. With First Bright Thing, I really wanted to talk about queer history in the Midwest, specifically in Midwest America. And I also wanted to talk about how big of a deal the Great War was. One thing I saw when I first went to London is how impactful the two world wars still are in Europe. And we don't have that over here in the US. It's just very much like, well, that happened over there. And a lot of people don't know anything about World War I. So the idea of how does this British character deal with what happened in the 20s, or in the 20s, how do they deal with that, what just happened? And this American character, how are they dealing with it? And how do these two different geographic locations process trauma when it comes to this particular trench warfare? So I think that I want to talk about real life stuff, and while high fantasy and while space travel, etc., talks about that too. I think that one really great thing about speculative fiction is that it is always teaching us about the quote real world. I think the way that I enter it is through history and through what I am currently seeing. But any good spec fic is going to do that in its own way, even if it's on a moon made of cheese or something.
Yeah, could hold up a mirror to society in some form, isn't it? Yeah. And I wanted to ask about your general writing process. Are you someone who sits down and plans out exactly what they want to write before they write down, or do you kind of discover it as you write? What's your process?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out my process.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, so I very much started off as a pantser, or I thought I did. When I was a kid, I would, because I was a theater kid, I would put myself in a room and like act out the scene and then sit down and write it. And it wasn't until like 20 years later I realized that was me plotting and not pantsing. And so as I grew up and like grew out of that imaginative space, I was trying to do the same thing of like sitting down and writing, but I hadn't plotted anything ahead of time. So it was a lot of like, did this scene work? No, it didn't. I have to go write it again. And it just was a very long process of writing and rewriting. I just started a zero draft of a new project. And what I'm trying to do with this one is like do an outline of the scene and then kind of like put in little pieces of the scene. And then my beta reader, my alpha reader is my wife. And I'm like, is this working? And she'll be like, okay, yeah, but you forgot about the economic implications of blah, blah, blah. Or like, well, that doesn't make sense with that character. And I'll be like, okay. And so I'm like, I'm glad I didn't write the whole scene and then realize. So it's kind of like a planting situation at this point.
Kind of bit by bit as you kind of... We have chatted to a few folk who do, I guess, kind of similar, where they have like, they'll do 10, 20,000 words and then stop and then go back and, you know, check that and then redraft that maybe and then move on to the next chunk. And so do it in kind of, you edit in chunks as they go. So by the time they get to the end, it's kind of been edited, you know, 3-4 times, I suppose, by the end of it. Is that so? Do you end up with quite a clean, I guess, call it first draft, but is it no?
No. So my zero draft is a mess, and it usually looks nothing like what it ends up being. But I now I'm a professor at Drexel for their MFA program, and I just tell my students, I'm like, look, you gotta make mistakes. You've gotta mess up. It's going to be messy and awful. But you got to have the words there in order to do something with them. So I kind of see it like, and this sounds so pretentious, but like how Michelangelo talked about like chipping away at the brick of marble. And so I just kind of see it as like, you have to have the general shape and then you can start putting in the nose and the eyes and the, you know, the details. So usually my zero draft is real bad, and it's a lot of like, she stared, he stared, she walked, he stood, and the dialogue is usually okay because I have a theater background, and then the pacing's weird, everything is wonky, and it's like, kill me mother, and then I go back and start putting in the themes that I saw arose in the zero draft. I start finessing the description and not having just like white rooms, and start like actually making it into something that someone can read.
I always find it fascinating that, you know, obviously we speak to lots of authors about their process and stuff, and you know, what I find very difficult, and I think this is on the other end of things that isn't very good, is that you get kind of stuck because you don't want to move on because you don't think it works yet. And so you can kind of get stuck on something, or it takes you a long time to then move on to the next bit and the next bit. And I can see the advantage of you know, just saying to yourself, well, this is the first draft. I need to get the bones of this story on the page, and then go back, and then I can rework it and rework it and rework it. But I suppose, you know, if there's one thing I've learned, everyone has their own approach. As long as they get to the end with something, then that I suppose is what's important. You mentioned obviously you've got that theatre background, and I just wondered, is it something that you would you want to write a play or anything like that again in the future?
I mean, yeah, if the opportunity arose, I definitely would. Yeah, I think that where I am right now, I am learning so much about prose and reading a lot of prose, and just kind of enmeshed in that world. It's a completely different toolbox. And so, yes, I don't have any projects right now, but yeah, if I had the chance, then I would, you know, brush off my tools and do the thing. I still like it. But I've really gotten to love writing language and putting sentences together, in a description of a setting. And I've really gotten into setting, which you don't have a lot in playwriting. Your setting is very limited, because of budgets and actual dimensional space.
Yeah, we've not actually had many people that have written that have been playwrights on
No,
the
that's right.
podcast
Yeah.
before, and is writing for the stage in terms of a technical writing similar to writing like a movie script or a TV script, or are they entirely different?
I think they're
Beasts.
entirely different. I mean, I've never written a movie or TV script. I've studied them, but I'm not brave enough. From what I can glean from screenplays and teleplays is that it's very visual, and it has a certain beat to it. There's a certain language that you learn when it comes to seeing it through the lens. Kind of the same way, but different, when it comes to writing a play, because you need to know how a stage works and how actors get on and off and how the director is going to look at this and interpret it. I think that screenwriting has a lot more description when it comes to setting the stage or setting the scene, whereas plays, unless you're Tennessee Williams, doesn't have a lot of stage directions because legally they don't have to follow your stage directions. They only have to follow your spoken dialogue.
Oh, right, okay. I
Yeah,
didn't
so
realize
one of the things that we did in undergrad is write a whole play without any stage directions.
that. Okay.
And it was one of
Alright,
the
okay,
favorite things
cool.
I worked on. But yeah, it's completely different.
So, that makes sense, I suppose. So for a film, I hadn't thought about that, but for a film, as you say, it's the lens, right? You're always working out what's the lens seeing, how are we coming to this scene, etc. Whereas I suppose on a stage, it's obviously there's no lens; it's just a whole stage. But then if you're not giving any stage directions, is that something which you just leave up to the director to decide when they're putting their play together, how they want the actors to stand, with how they want them to come on and off, etc. That sort of thing.
Yeah, it's super collaborative. So it's up to the director, but it's also, I mean, if you have especially seasoned actors, they're going to take over those characters and they're going to decide what those characters are doing and where they're doing it and how they're speaking it. I mean, that's their job, which is why it's super exciting to work with actors, because you like create this character and then they make them literally come alive.
That's cool.
Yeah, and that's why I love working with audiobooks too. And like when I'm writing my stuff, I'm thinking about, okay, in the audiobook, how is this gonna work?
Do you ever write something and then see an actor bring it to life, and then in your head think that's not what I intended at all. They've picked up completely wrong, or they're ruining that they're doing something funny with the way they come on or the way they walk that's changing the scene or something. Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, and you actually learn how to troubleshoot that in theater school.
Okay. How to gently tell people you're doing it wrong.
Well, how to write the scene in the first place so they won't do that.
Oh, I see. Okay, right, that's clever, right?
Yeah, so there was a lot of like in theater school, a lot of like setting your intention and making sure that people know the aesthetic, and like if a character was gonna do this, then how do you make them from not doing this? And like there's a lot of like building the maze for the rest of the collab, because as soon as your script is done, that's your job done. Like it's your story and like your name is on the program, but it's not just your piece of work. It's also what those actors are deciding to do and what the director wants to do. And I've seen not just like a couple of actors in plays that I've written, but just like in Shakespeare, like, do a thing and you're like, what? So yeah, it definitely happens.
That's cool.
So obviously Lighthouse at the Edge of the World is out soon, and you said you just started the zero draft of something else. Is that the next project that you're starting now, or is there something in between?
Oh, so there's a couple of things that I can't talk about yet, but will hopefully come to light soon. My next, I just kind of delved into my next idea for an adult fantasy, which is kind of my like Rage Against Fascism book, which I can't really say anything more about it at this point. I mean, it's still a baby, but yeah, it's different. It's a little more high fantasy than the first two. And it definitely is me kind of pulling off the reins when it comes to Dakota, when it comes to my feelings about certain things that are happening in the world. So
Excellent.
Nice.
Cool. Well, yeah, we look forward to that. What was the last book that you read?
oh my gosh. So I just finished Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. Is it good?
It's good. Never read it, but it's good. No, it wrecked me. I'm still very wrecked. I saw a TikTok that was like, oh yeah, no, this is an amazing book, 11 out of 10 in all regards. Oh, so you recommend it? No, never touch this book. It's so sad. It's just, oh my God. Haymitch has always been one of my favorite characters in the Hunger Games series. And that third act just kind of destroyed my summer, and it's fine.
Right.
But like in the best way. So yeah, my wife and I did a reread of all the Hunger Games. We read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for the first time, and we just finished Sunrise like last week. I'm currently reading an arc of Memory Hunters by Mia Sai. That's the next one that I'm reading. And Nobody in Particular by Sophie Gonzalez. Just started it last night, and I like it so far. I think my favorite read this year has been Notes from a Regicide by Isaac Fellman, which came out, I think, in April.
Okay.
Oh my God, it's so good. And I keep, like, every time somebody's like, oh, do you recommend a book? I'm like, yes, Notes from a Regicide.
It feels like the Sunshine and the Reaping is been massive, but it feels like it's punched through in a larger way than Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes did.
Yeah.
Which I always have thought it'd be the other way around, because that was like going back to the Hunger Games after so long. But this new one seems to be just everywhere. Like, it's really done fantastic.
Oh yeah. Like my feelings about Ballad and Songbirds and Snakes, like I'm so torn, because I really hate Snow so much. I hate the main characters so much, and you're supposed to. And there are things about it that I'm like, oh, that's not how, I don't know. But then like at the end, I'm just like, oh, it's so good. So it's definitely, I am definitely not a Lucy Gray Snow shipper. And I know that a lot of people are, and I'm like, Godspeed. But I don't know, like it was a different kind of book. Like Songbirds and Snakes was quieter. It felt a little older. The ending was just beautifully poetic, though. And Sunrise was like, yeah, you know all that poetry in Songbirds and Snakes? Well, bam! Like,
Yeah. Okay.
at the end, I feel like we get a conclusion to how that book, I don't want to give it away, but how that book actually ended. And you're like, oh, well, okay. Like, it's just kind of this, Songbirds and Snakes is a pretty ballad, and Sunrise on the Reaping is a smack in the face.
Right.
Okay. Nice.
Excellent.
What about the last film that you watched? What was that?
I saw the pro shot of Frozen the Musical last night. Does that count? I'm trying to think of the last film that I like sat down and watched. We've been watching a lot of like video essays. Gosh, do I even watch movies anymore? Yeah, I watched Frozen last night.
That counts.
Fair
That's
enough.
fine. Yeah,
Frozen.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've grown up with two young daughters, so I know Frozen well. I like it.
Your
I'm a big fan of Frozen.
your special skill is to sing "Let It Go" with your back to the words and the
yeah,
karaoke
it's
night.
a karaoke special.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
That song's burned in your head now.
What about TV? What TV shows are you watching?
Yeah, so I'm doing a rewatch of this very silly cartoon. So it's funny because like a lot of the stuff that I read and write is very serious and very heartbreaking. And then like what I watch on my television is so unhinged. It's just, I'm a big cartoon nerd and I love comedy. And so my recommendations do not always fit together. Like we did watch the first episode of Andor, which I've heard is amazing. Andor was a little too stressful for me, but I'm gonna do it. But the rewatch I'm doing is Centaur World, which
Okay, I've never heard of that.
Don't know that.
it's okay. So it's this cartoon, and it's like taking this very serious, like war-torn anime, and taking those characters and like throwing them into Adventure Time or Steven Universe.
Okay.
Right.
But it's actually it's it's about war, and it's about the dual identities in each of us, and what is friendship, and what is hope, and what does it mean to be pulled away from your homeland. And like there's a lot of deep stuff going on, even though it's a very silly cartoon.
Nice.
Excellent.
I'll check that out. And the very, very last thing we do is a super quick fire either or, and there's no right answer really to most of these, perhaps apart from the last one. But let's start off with what about writing plays or writing novels?
Writing novels.
Okay.
TV or cinema?
Probably TV. It's a little difficult to get to the cinema right now in the US with everything going on. So TV is a nice little comfort.
Nice. Night owl or early bird?
Oh my gosh, it depends on the day. I mean, I would have said night owl like a year ago, but now I've been getting up early, so I'll say early bird.
Music or no music when you're writing?
Music. There has to be music.
And the last one, let's go for real book or ebook.
Oh, I love the real books. I like to touch on like the different like feelings of the covers and seeing that. Yeah, I just love real books.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I really enjoyed that chat. That was really interesting. And as we said in the interview there, the whole Greek myths is something which I've always been fascinated by. And growing up, I remember having that book of Greek stories.
Yeah,
and loving
I
it.
think I probably had the same one.
I'm
Was
sure.
it the Eastbourne?
I think it might have been.
Yeah,
It had an orange cover, a big.
I think mine had a purpley, but then I am older than you. It was
Yeah, it's
probably
probably
an
the
earlier
first edition. Yeah. But and even I remember. I mean, things like God of War, the video game. I remember playing that and loving the fact that you got to explore all these Pandora's box, etc., all that kind of stuff. It's you said at the intro, and it's true. They are legends for a reason, and they've stayed this long because they are such great stories. So.
Yeah, and I think doing things like making the lake beside Chicago become the river Styx in this story. All that sort of stuff is very clever. So you can pick up The Lighthouse at the End of the World now. And thanks again to JR for coming on to the podcast. Yeah. But next week it's another 2-episode week.
Incredible.
Just can't stop.
Can't stop. Just can't stop recording.
So the first episode we are speaking with Intisar Kanani, who is another fantasy writer, slightly more high fantasy, but also an author that is bringing sort of, I think her catchphrase is diverse worlds for mighty girls. So, a different angle on your sort of traditional fantasy stories.
You're sure it's not, it's clobbering time? Or is that the thing?
I think that might be the thing. That's a different catchphrase.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, it's again, Tarek couldn't be bothered turning up for this one, so it's just me. But it's a good chat. So yeah, please do tune in for that one. And then our second guest next week is our live show that we recorded at Chimera with MHI Indy.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, that show.
Yeah, it was. So we will. It's a double fantasy week.
Yeah,
double fantasy week that again explores fantasy from a more diverse angle, which we're seeing a lot more books doing that rather than your sort of conventional medieval Europe setting for fantasy. So both really fun and interesting episodes, so please do tune in for those. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on your favourite podcast app, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. And I mentioned our Patreon at the start. If you check that out and want to support us, we would be hugely grateful, because that does also help us to continue to make the podcast as well.
And if you'd like to get in touch, as always, there are multiple routes you can find us. I would probably say the easiest way is just to go into Google and type our name or podcast in, page 1, Writers Podcast. Go onto any of the social media platforms, search for UK Page 1, search for State Podcasts, which is the parent network that we're all part of now. Go into YouTube, look up our YouTube channel, UK Page 1, leave us a comment, leave us a rating and review, drop us an email at podcast@writegear.co.uk.
Yeah.
What's stopping you guys?
Or podcast.
Hello?
Never mind.
That's worse than me, Marco.
My brain has gone to mush. There's many ways to get in touch with us, as Tarek says. At steppodcast.com.
It's too late, they've gone.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, have a great week, and we will see you for 2 episodes next week.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.